I remember the exact feeling of her hands on my back. Not a shove, not a push exactly, but a sudden, brutal jolt. The kind that tells you the ground you thought was solid under your feet just vanished. 1 second, I was standing on the balcony, staring out at the city lights, the cool night air on my skin. The next, I was airborne, falling. It wasn't a scream that escaped my lips first. It was more like a gasp, a choked silent terror as my stomach lurched into my throat. The sky and the city lights spun wildly. My apartment building, my home, the place where I'd felt safe just seconds before, was rushing away above me. All I could hear was the wind rushing past my ears and, echoing in my mind, my sister's voice. Just moments before she did it. Just moments before she ended my life as I knew it. "You think you're so special, don't you, Sarah?" She'd sneered, her voice dripping with venom I'd never heard before. We'd been arguing again about something stupid, something that felt trivial even then, but in hindsight, it was just the excuse she needed. Her eyes were wild, not like my sister, not like Emily, the person I'd shared a bedroom with growing up, the person I told all my secrets to. This was a stranger, filled with pure, unadulterated hate. Always the favorite, always getting everything handed to you. Well, not anymore. You don't deserve any of it. Not a single damn thing. And then came the jolt, the feeling of being propelled forward over the railing, into the empty air. Hitting the ground was a symphony of shattering bone and blinding pain. It stole my breath, stole my consciousness. The last thing I saw was the blurry shape of the balcony high above, and maybe, just maybe, a figure looking down. Then, darkness, cold, complete, terrifying darkness. Waking up was worse. The pain was everywhere, a relentless, burning, throbbing agony that engulfed my entire body. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. Tubes were everywhere. Beeping machines were my only companions. I was alive, barely, broken in ways I wouldn't understand for a long, long time. I was in St. Jude's Hospital downtown. I recognized the view from the window eventually, though my vision was blurry. Days blurred into weeks. The nurses were kind, gentle as they turned my broken body. But the worst part wasn't the physical agony. It was the visitors. My family. My parents arrived first. Their faces weren't etched with the sheer horror you'd expect from a mother and father, whose youngest daughter had just fallen 3 stories. No, they looked stressed, annoyed almost. Their eyes darted around the room. They spoke in hushed tones to the doctors, their voices tight. "Tragic accident," I heard my mom say, her voice trembling slightly but not with grief, more like forced emotion. She must have slipped. She's been under a lot of stress lately. Stress? I'd just landed a huge promotion at the architecture firm. I was finally paying off my student loans. I was happy. Stress? Then I heard my father. "Yes, a terrible fall. We told her to be careful on that old balcony. Didn't we say that, Martha?" He squeezed my mother's arm. It wasn't a comforting gesture. It was a signal, a cue. They were lying. Right there, in front of the doctors, in front of the nurses, beside my broken body, they were constructing a story. My story. One where I was clumsy, unstable, maybe even trying to hurt myself. Anything but the truth. Anything but admitting what Emily had done. My sister came a few days later. Emily, my older sister by 2 years, my childhood shadow, my confidant, my first and only sibling. Seeing her face was like a punch to the gut, harder than the fall itself. She looked pale, drawn, her eyes were red. Had she been crying? For a split second I felt a flicker of the old love, the old connection. Maybe it was an accident? Maybe she didn't mean to? Then she spoke, and that flicker of hope died. She didn't come to my bedside. She stood near the door talking to our parents. Her voice was low, but in the sterile quiet of the hospital room, I could hear every word. "Are you sure the police bought it?" she whispered, frantic. Did they ask about, you know? My dad's voice was firm. They asked. We said she'd been withdrawn, maybe had a bit too much to drink. The balcony railing was loose. We're getting it fixed. It's closed. Just stick to the story. It was an accident. She fell. Emily let out a shaky breath. Okay, good. Just make sure she doesn't. Her eyes flickered towards me. Even from across the room, I could see the fear in them. Fear, not remorse. She was afraid I would tell the truth. She wasn't sorry she'd done it. That was the moment the pain in my body was overshadowed by a new, more searing kind of agony. Betrayal. Not just by my sister, but by my own parents. The people who were supposed to protect me, to love me unconditionally, were actively participating in burying the truth. They were protecting her, the person who had tried to kill me, and they were sacrificing me to do it. I lay there, trapped in my broken body, unable to protest, unable to scream the truth, unable to even cry. Tears just silently tracked down my temples, pooling in my ears. I was alone, more alone than I had ever been in my life. My own family had pushed me off a building and then buried me under a pile of lies. This wasn't just an accident. This wasn't just a sisterly fight gone wrong. This was something calculated, something they were all in on. And I had no idea why. During those first agonizing weeks in the hospital, when every breath felt like broken glass and every movement was a fresh wave of torment, my world shrank to the four walls of my room. Physical therapy was brutal. Learning to just sit up again felt like climbing Mount Everest. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but they painted a grim picture. Months of recovery, possibly permanent limitations, a long, hard road ahead. My family's visits became less frequent. They always had an excuse. Work is crazy. We're dealing with the apartment repairs. Emily isn't feeling well. Their voices on the phone were clipped, distant. When they did visit, their eyes didn't meet mine. They'd ask the nurses about my progress, nod, say something generic like, "Hang in there, Sarah," and then leave. It wasn't just indifference. It was actively hostile. They treated me like a problem they wished would go away. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was a complication, a piece of inconvenient evidence. I remember one afternoon, my mom was on the phone in the hallway just outside my room, talking to my dad. She didn't know I was awake and could hear her. "No, Bill, she's still conscious," she sighed, exasperated. "She can hear things. We have to be careful what we say. I wish it had been cleaner." My heart froze. Cleaner? Cleaner than multiple broken bones and internal injuries? Cleaner than months of pain and uncertainty? What did she mean by cleaner? Did she mean fatal? Did my own mother wish I had died? That's when something inside me solidified. The despair, the pain, the fear. It didn't vanish, but it was joined by something cold and hard, pure, unadulterated rage. I wasn't going to let them bury me, not literally and not figuratively. They wanted me gone. They wanted me silent. Fine. I would be silent. I would play the part of the broken, damaged girl. But inside I was building something. A plan. People think that when something horrific happens, like being pushed off a building by your own sister, your mind just breaks, and maybe a part of it does. For a while, I felt like a shattered vase, all the pieces scattered, impossible to put back together. There was the raw physical pain, overwhelming everything. Then the emotional devastation, the gut-wrenching realization that the people who should be your safe harbor are actually the storm itself. It's disorienting, terrifying. You question everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, family. But then something else happens. When you're stripped bare, when you have nothing left to lose, you find a core of strength you didn't know existed. For me, that strength was forged in the fire of betrayal. Their lies, their indifference, their obvious relief that I was taken care of. It didn't break me. It hardened me. It turned the pain into fuel. Lying there, helpless, listening to them plot, I made a silent vow. I wasn't going to be a victim. I was going to survive, heal, and make them pay. Pay for the pain, for the lies, for trying to erase me. My focus narrowed to one thing, getting strong enough to stand up, and then making them fall. Months crawled by. I moved from the hospital to a rehabilitation center. I was still heavily reliant on others, but I was slowly regaining strength and mobility. I could speak now, though my voice was often weak. My family visited even less. When they called, the conversations were brief and strained. They'd talk about their lives, my sister Emily's new job, mundane things, as if I hadn't just survived something terrible, as if she hadn't put me there. I learned to hide my emotions. I'd smile weakly, agree with their narrative of a tragic accident, apologize for being a burden. I wanted them to think I was broken, compliant, no longer a threat. Inside, I was observing, listening, plotting. I needed help. I couldn't do this alone. The first person I thought of was my best friend, Chloe. We'd been inseparable since college, but my family, especially Emily, had always been subtly hostile towards her, hinting she was a bad influence. Since the accident, Chloe had tried to visit and call, but my family had intercepted everything, telling her I wasn't up to visitors. I needed rest. My phone was off. One night, when a kind night nurse wasn't looking, I managed to get my hands on a borrowed tablet for a few minutes. I found Chloe online and sent her a short cryptic message. Chloe, it wasn't an accident. It was Emily. They're lying. I need your help. Don't contact me through family. I included the rehab center's name and my room number. Chloe responded the next day. Not a message, but she showed up. My parents were furious when they found out how she'd gotten past their unofficial blockade. But Chloe was persistent. She told them, calmly but firmly, that I needed my friends, not just my family, for support. They couldn't stop her without raising suspicions. Seeing Chloe was like finding an oasis in the desert. I couldn't tell her everything immediately, not with nurses and staff around. But I squeezed her hand, looked her in the eye, and whispered, "It wasn't an accident, Chloe. Emily pushed me. Mom and Dad are covering for her." Chloe's eyes widened in shock, then filled with fierce determination. Oh my God, Sarah, I knew something was wrong. They were so weird. Don't worry, I'm here. What do you need? That was the turning point. I had an ally. From that moment on, Chloe became my lifeline. She visited regularly. While she was there, we spoke in guarded terms, but she'd leave little notes hidden under my pillow or in my water cup with questions or updates. She became my eyes and ears on the outside world. I started asking Chloe to do small things. Can you go to my old apartment building? See if they fixed the railing. Ask the super if anyone reported anything unusual around the time of my fall. Can you check my bank accounts online? See what's happened since I've been in here? Can you find out if Mom and Dad have been meeting with any lawyers? The information Chloe brought back was chilling. The apartment building super didn't remember the railing being particularly loose, but said my father had paid him a large sum of cash to handle the repairs quietly and not mention anything to the police. My bank accounts were being accessed. Large sums transferred out to accounts I didn't recognize. And yes, my parents had been seen entering the offices of Sullivan and Associates, a prominent law firm known for handling complex financial matters and damage control for wealthy families. The pieces started clicking into place. The stress my parents showed wasn't about my recovery. It was about managing the fallout. The money transfers weren't for my medical care. They were liquidating my assets. The law firm wasn't for my benefit. It was to protect themselves and Emily, and probably to secure whatever wealth they could from my life insurance or other holdings. But why? Why all this? Emily's jealousy had always been there, but pushing me off a balcony? And my parents covering it up so thoroughly, even moving my money? It felt disproportionate, even for extreme family dysfunction. There had to be more. Chloe and I, communicating through hushed conversations and hidden notes, started digging deeper. Chloe, being outside, had access to things I didn't. She started researching Sullivan and Associates. She looked into my family's background, their businesses, their assets. My family wasn't old money, but they'd become quite wealthy over the past 20 years. They ran a seemingly legitimate real estate development company. Then Chloe found something odd. An old article from a local newspaper archive, dated about 25 years ago. It mentioned a lawsuit, a bitter dispute over land ownership, and a collapsed business deal involving a small local developer named Thomas Miller. The name didn't ring a bell immediately, but the location mentioned in the article was the site of one of my family's earliest and most profitable development projects. The article was short and vague, saying the case was settled out of court under confidential terms. It was a tiny thread, but it felt significant. Why would my family be involved in a bitter lawsuit with a small developer right before their own company took off? I asked Chloe to dig deeper into Thomas Miller. It wasn't easy. He seemed to have disappeared off the map after the lawsuit. But Chloe was tenacious. She tracked down his daughter, who still lived in the area, under a different last name. Getting her to talk was difficult. She was wary, still hurt by the past. But when Chloe mentioned my family's name, there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Chloe explained who I was, what had happened to me, and my suspicion that the family's wealth was built on something dirty. The daughter, a woman named Clara, finally agreed to meet with Chloe cautiously. What Clara revealed was the dark secret. Thomas Miller was her father. He was a brilliant but naive real estate developer who had acquired a prime piece of land for a huge project. My father, Bill, and his partner at the time, who has since died, had approached Thomas Miller offering a partnership. They needed his land and his vision. Miller needed capital and connections. According to Clara, they formed a partnership agreement. But just before the final papers were signed, just before the project was set to break ground, my father and his partner systematically and ruthlessly squeezed Thomas Miller out. They used legal loopholes, forged signatures on preliminary documents Miller had trusted them with, spread rumors that his business was failing to scare off other investors, and ultimately filed a fraudulent lawsuit against him claiming he had breached the agreement. Thomas Miller was a good man, but he was no match for their cunning and ruthlessness. He didn't have the resources to fight a prolonged legal battle against a well-funded, unethical law firm, which I later confirmed was a precursor to Sullivan and Associates. He lost everything: his land, his business, his savings. The stress and betrayal destroyed him. He had a massive heart attack a year later and died, a broken man, leaving Clara and her mother with nothing. My family built their fortune on that land, using Miller's original plans and vision. That first project was the foundation of their success. They didn't just win a business deal, they stole a man's life's work and, indirectly, caused his death. The confidential settlement terms likely involved a pathetic payout to keep Miller silent and bankrupt, and a non-disclosure agreement to bury the truth. This was the dark secret. Not just a financial crime, but an act of pure, destructive greed that had ruined a family. And my family had been living a lie ever since, building their respectable facade on stolen foundations. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Emily's intense jealousy wasn't just about me getting a promotion or attention. It was about inheritance. Their entire fortune was illegitimate. If the truth ever came out, their empire, their reputation, everything would crumble. And I, Sarah, the good daughter, the successful architect, the one who asked too many questions, the one who maybe, just maybe, reminded them too much of the integrity they lacked. I was a potential liability. What if I stumbled upon something? What if someone from the past, like Clara, reached out to me? Emily's desperate act of pushing me off the balcony wasn't just petty rage. It was an attempt to eliminate a perceived threat to the stolen kingdom she stood to inherit. My parents' cover-up wasn't just protecting Emily. It was protecting the secret that the entire family fortune was built upon. The rage returned, cold and sharp. They had tried to kill me, taken my money, destroyed my reputation, and all to protect a legacy built on lies and theft. Now I knew why. And knowing why gave me the power to fight back. My focus shifted from just recovering and getting justice for the fall to exposing the entire truth. I wasn't just a victim of assault. I was a potential key to unlocking decades of their deceit. I had Clara. She had partial records, her father's journals detailing the betrayal, and most importantly, her testimony. I had Chloe, my unwavering ally, and I now had a target: the family's ill-gotten gains and the lies they lived. Chloe helped me find a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but someone fearless, with experience in complex white-collar crime and personal injury cases. We found Mark Jenkins. He was initially skeptical, but as Chloe and I presented the evidence, the hospital reports confirming the nature of my injuries didn't match a simple slip. The super's testimony about the cash payment, the suspicious money transfers, Clara's story, and the old newspaper clipping. His skepticism turned into grim determination. "This is big, Sarah," he said, leaning back in his chair in his modest office. He wasn't in a fancy high-rise like Sullivan and Associates. He was a fighter. Attempted murder disguised as an accident, compounded by potential fraud and conspiracy stretching back decades. If we do this, we go all in. We don't just sue for your injuries. We expose the whole rotten core. That was exactly what I wanted. My recovery was still ongoing, but my purpose fueled me. I worked tirelessly with Mark and Chloe. We pieced together financial records, connecting the transfers from my accounts to their business dealings. Mark used legal avenues to subpoena bank records and corporate documents, confirming the links to Thomas Miller's old land. We built a case against Emily for aggravated assault and against my parents for conspiracy, fraud, and aiding and abetting. The plan was risky. My family had money and powerful lawyers. They would fight back dirty. But Mark had a strategy for the takedown, a way to use their arrogance and reliance on their old tricks against them. The legal process began quietly. First, a civil suit filed on my behalf by Mark Jenkins against Emily and my parents, citing my injuries, the circumstances of the fall, and the financial irregularities. This was the bait. As we expected, Sullivan and Associates responded aggressively. They filed motions to dismiss, doubled down on the accident story, and tried to paint me as unstable and greedy, trying to extort money from my loving family. Their initial confidence was high. They thought this was just a personal injury case they could bury in legal maneuvering and character assassination, just like they had done to Thomas Miller decades ago. The first key hearing was a preliminary motion hearing, held in a courtroom downtown. It wasn't a full trial, but it was an opportunity for both sides to present their initial arguments and evidence to the judge. My family was there, looking smug and composed, flanked by their lawyers from Sullivan and Associates. Emily avoided my gaze, her face pale but set in a mask of feigned concern. My parents looked annoyed that I was still causing trouble. I was there too, sitting beside Mark Jenkins. I still needed a cane to walk, and the physical scars were visible, but I wore a tailored suit that made me feel strong. My voice was steady when I spoke to Mark. I wasn't the broken girl they'd left for dead. Their lawyer, a man named Mr. Davison, a smooth operator from Sullivan and Associates, presented their case first. He spoke of a tragic domestic accident, citing my history of stress, a complete fabrication, and the loose railing. He dismissed the financial claims as irrelevant and baseless, portraying me as an ungrateful child attempting to capitalize on her family's wealth after a self-inflicted injury. His tone was condescending, dismissive. Then it was Mark's turn. He didn't start by talking about the fall. He started by talking about a man named Thomas Miller. There was a subtle shift in the courtroom. My parents exchanged nervous glances. Emily's eyes darted to their lawyers. Mr. Davison looked momentarily confused, then wary. This wasn't the script they had prepared for. Mark laid out the story of Thomas Miller. He presented the old newspaper article, followed by documents Clara had kept, her father's business plans, correspondence with my father, early drafts of partnership agreements. Then he called Clara Miller to the stand as his first witness. Clara, nervous but determined, told her father's story. She spoke of his dreams, his hard work, the betrayal, his ruin, and his death. She presented his journal entries detailing the fraud. She spoke of how her family was left destitute while mine built an empire on their misery. The atmosphere in the courtroom crackled. My family looked increasingly panicked. Davison objected repeatedly, calling it irrelevant, ancient history, character assassination. But Mark calmly tied it back. "Your Honor," Mark said, his voice clear and strong, addressing the judge. "We contend that the pattern of fraudulent behavior exhibited by the defendants over 2 decades ago is not merely ancient history. It is the foundation upon which their entire fortune was built, and it provides the crucial motive for the attempted murder of my client." He paused, letting that sink in. The word murder hung in the air. Ms. Sarah Miller discovered evidence related to her family's past wrongdoings, evidence that threatened to expose the truth about the origins of their wealth. Her sister, Emily Miller, acting on this, and perhaps fearing the loss of her own future inheritance, brutally attacked my client, pushing her from a 3-story balcony in an attempt to silence her permanently and cover up the family's dark secret. When that failed, the defendants conspired to cover up the attempted murder, transferring my client's personal assets to consolidate their control and further pressure her into silence. Mark then presented the evidence of the money transfers, the super's affidavit about the cash payment and instruction to lie, and expert medical testimony concluding my injuries were consistent with being pushed rather than a simple slip or trip. He then delivered the final, unexpected blow, the third twist. "And finally, Your Honor, we have evidence that the defendants were not merely covering up an accident, but actively planning to ensure my client could not recover and testify against them. We have a recording." He played a short audio file. It was the conversation I had overheard between my parents outside my hospital room. My mother's voice clear as day. "I just I wish it had been cleaner," followed by my father's sigh. The air went out of the room. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. My father's face turned ashen. Emily looked like she was about to faint. Their lawyers were stunned, clearly having no idea that recording existed. It was the final nail in the coffin of their fabricated story. It wasn't just about a fall anymore. It was about a family willing to get rid of one of their own, first by violence, then by hoping she would die, all to protect a fortune built on lies. The judge's expression was stern. Mr. Davison sputtered objections, but they were weak now. The damage was done. The hidden motive, the desperation to protect the secret, was laid bare. The attempted murder made terrifying sense in the context of their history. The hearing didn't end with a final verdict, but it was the decisive blow. The judge immediately ordered a criminal investigation into Emily for assault with a deadly weapon and into my parents for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. She also froze a significant portion of my family's assets pending further investigation into their origins, giving credence to the fraud allegations. The legal battle was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted entirely. The civil case continued, but the criminal charges were the real pressure point. Facing prison time and the collapse of their entire fraudulent empire, my family's united front crumbled. My parents turned on Emily, blaming her impulsive actions. Emily blamed them for building a life based on lies that ultimately trapped her. Their expensive lawyers from Sullivan and Associates couldn't save them from the truth, especially with frozen assets limiting their options. Emily was eventually convicted of aggravated assault and sentenced to prison. My parents faced financial ruin and potential charges related to the decades-old fraud and the conspiracy to cover up my assault. Rather than face a full trial and public humiliation, they agreed to a settlement in the civil case that stripped them of most of their assets, ordered significant restitution to Clara Miller's family, finally bringing them some measure of justice, and awarded me substantial compensation for my injuries and the assets they had stolen from me. I also got something more important than money: my reputation back. The truth came out. The story hit the news, not the one about a troubled girl falling off a balcony, but the one about a resilient woman surviving her family's dark secrets and fighting for justice. I wasn't pitied. I was respected for my strength. My physical recovery is still ongoing, but I am walking, living independently. I have financial security, earned not through inheritance, but through fighting for what was rightfully mine and demanding accountability. The family I thought I had is gone, revealed to be built on rot. But in losing them, I found my true self, stronger, more determined, and finally, truly free. I used the settlement money responsibly. I paid for the best medical care and physical therapy. I invested wisely. I'm slowly getting back into architecture, focusing on projects that help people, built on solid, honest foundations. I stay in touch with Chloe, who was my rock. I even met Clara Miller properly. We formed a tentative bond, two families wronged by the same people finding common ground. Looking back on that night on the balcony, it feels surreal. The pain was real. The fear was real. The betrayal was agonizingly real. But it wasn't the end they intended. It was a horrific beginning. The beginning of uncovering a truth so dark it explained everything. And the beginning of my own journey to reclaim my life, my honor, and my independence. My family, the people who pushed me away in every sense of the word, are now paying the price. Their wealth is gone, their reputation is in tatters, and my sister is in prison. I have my life back, stronger and truer than before. But it leaves me with a question about forgiveness. After everything they did, the lies, the theft, the attempted murder, the cover-up, wishing I was dead, can you ever truly forgive that? Should I? What do you think? Should Sarah ever forgive her family after what they did? My fight for justice is won, my independence secured. But building a new life from the ruins of the old one brings new challenges and choices. What do you think comes next for Sarah? A. She finds peace and focuses on building her new life, leaving the past behind. B. She continues to face challenges or seeks further forms of justice, perhaps involving others wronged by her family's past actions.